everyone, Sam Says is a little bit different this week. With no game week last weekend because of the FA Cup break, we're going to do a Sam Says Q&A session. We put out a post over on our Twitter and on our website to ask for some questions for tonight, and I've got 5 that I'm going to work my way through. Okay then, let's get started. So the first question that we pulled from Twitter was, for those with Kane, is Aguero a viable replacement or too much of a risk? This is a difficult one for me. I think with Manchester City, they are one of the kind of go-to clubs, I guess, when you want a premium asset who's guaranteed to do you well. They are going to cost you a lot of money, and therefore we expect a good level of returns from them in return. What we've seen of late with Manchester City is that their assets haven't necessarily been performing as we would want them to. The likes of Sterling, maybe we should bracket KDB in there, although he's been doing much better in the last couple of game weeks. But they've not necessarily pulled in those massive hauls that we would anticipate or that we've seen in previous seasons. Now, obviously with Aguero, he's been out injured for a while. He is going to cost you 0.7 more than Harry Kane does. So if you're going to go from Kane to Aguero, you do need to have some money in the bank in order to be able to do that. Now, for me, the question was, is it too much of a risk? Yes, it is for me. We don't know yet if Aguero is going to play. Manchester City are currently playing Manchester United in the League Cup. It's currently 3-0 to Manchester United. Aguero didn't start but is on the bench. So will he or will he not therefore get a start in the Premier League? It remains to be seen. Jesus, who has been starting in the Premier League in Aguero's absence, is also on the bench tonight. So he's had a rest too. Let's see what that means for us in terms of Manchester City and the way that they decide to play in the Premier League. It's always difficult to know with Pep what he's going to do. He spoke earlier on in the season about how he wanted to use both Jesus and Aguero sometimes together, but also in rotation with each other. So I think if I was going to spend 11.7 million on a striker, I'd want them to be guaranteed to play. Now, having said all of this, I think there therefore are other options who would be potentially better replacements for Harry Kane. So we're going to move to the other side of North London. I think Aubameyang would be a really nice replacement for Kane. We've seen of the last couple of games with Arteta in charge that Arsenal have looked a really different side, and I think we should start to see a bit more of the old Aubameyang that we're used to. That little bit, not a lot, but a little bit cheaper. He's going to save you 0.2 million, so easy to go there. The fixtures look quite nice for him, with Palace next, then Sheffield United and then Chelsea. All of those games look relatively good for Aubameyang to get goal returns in, so he could be a better, in my eyes, replacement than Aguero would be. Other options, obviously, if you don't already have him, Vardy is potentially the obvious choice, having missed the last couple for his baby and then with his injury concern. But we will expect, and Rodgers has come out and said that we would expect to see him back in 22. Now, with him back, with a nice run of fixtures versus Southampton, then Burnley and West Ham, and costing you 0.9 less than Harry Kane, if you don't have him, I think he's the obvious, most viable alternative to Kane. Below him again, in terms of price, 1.7 less than you can have Firmino. Now, I'm not normally one to shout about Firmino. He tends to be a very streaky player, and Christmas tends to be the season to own him. Now, obviously, we're into January now, so I'm not necessarily convinced that he's going to go on a massive scoring run, but he has the added benefit of having double game week in game week 24. So we get Spurs and United next. Now, both of those are tough fixtures, but Spurs and Manchester United, we're seeing that from Manchester United tonight, that they can't keep a clean sheet. Spurs 100% can't keep a clean sheet. So those games could be good for Firmino attacking returns. And then obviously a double is tricky away for both of the games at West Ham and then at Wolves. But West Ham haven't been that solid defensively, and Wolves, they can leak the odd goal here or there, and I would expect that Liverpool would win those games, so he could be an option. If you really want to save yourselves a lot of money, there's obviously the likes of Jimenez, who is consistently making returns, and then you can use that money to maybe upgrade your midfield to cover the double game week at Liverpool if that's what you so choose. Or again, go down a little bit further and look at the likes of Danny Ings, who's just been on absolutely ridiculous form. And in terms of that striker position, for me, Danny Ings looks absolutely essential right now. Some nice fixtures coming up. Difficult game first off against Leicester in 22, but then after that, Wolves and Crystal Palace. So again, games that I could see him getting goals in. He's been able to score against the so-called Big Six clubs so far this season, so there's no reason to suggest that he can't score in those 3 games he's got coming up. For me, therefore, Aguero, not necessarily the best option. Absolutely worth a hit and worth a chance if you want to go that way. But I think there are better options that are going to be cheaper, less prone to rotation, and probably going to get you more attacking returns over the next few weeks. All right, moving on then. Second question, this time West Ham. So is Felipe Anderson a decent option? Playing almost as a striker, has a double game week to come, and is the most talented player in the West Ham squad. Ooh, praise indeed for Felipe Anderson there. I think Felipe Anderson is I agree actually, I think he is a talented player, and I think when he's on form he looks really good, and as an FPL asset when we see him playing well, as we saw at points over the 18-19 season, he can be a really good asset. But he can also be one of the most frustrating assets to own because he tends to do wonderful things in certain game weeks and then do nothing for a few weeks, and it's one of those, are the hauls when they come worth the weeks of nothing? Now obviously, with the double game week coming up, we'll start looking at West Ham assets. And I think sometimes the pull of a double game week is stronger than it should be. West Ham's double game week is really, really tough. They've got Leicester and they've got Liverpool. Now, Liverpool have kept 5 back-to-back clean sheets. Leicester also on a really good run of form. They're not giving up that many goals each game. So I would suggest that it's unlikely that in those 2 games that West Ham have got in the double that they're going to score a lot of goals. So therefore we're kind of putting our eggs in there. Is Felipe Anderson going to get the maybe 1 or 2 goals that West Ham score in that double game week? Now, for me, it's possible that he will. He is playing more centrally, as you say, almost striker-like. Yeah, he is. He's playing alongside Haller, with Fornals coming in. And Snodgrass staying closer out wide. So yes, he's getting in all the right positions. Yes, he has potential to do well. I think for me, what we've seen so far from West Ham is a game in the FA Cup against Gillingham and a game against a very, very poor, sorry Bournemouth fans, but a very, very poor Bournemouth side who just did not play very well and potentially flattered West Ham. Now, obviously we've seen some new manager bounce, but how much is that about West Ham and how much was that about the poor form that we saw from Bournemouth in that game? So I think we need to watch West Ham over the next, certainly into game week 22, see how they perform there. And then again in game week 23, before we make any decisions about Felipe Anderson in the double, I wouldn't want to bring somebody in on what we've seen from him into quite easy games that the West Ham have had. I would want to see him perform in some bigger, more difficult games against sides that do or have been on better form than Bournemouth have, before I would bring him in for a double game week against Leicester and Liverpool. Okay then, third question. This one hurts. So it says, are Spurs dead to us now? Wow. I think it's really hard to hold Spurs assets. The Spurs defence is incredibly poor right now. A lot of people own Gazaniga after the Reece injury. It seemed like the right thing to do. He was a nice cheap option. Spurs were coming into a nice run of fixtures, and so it did seem like a good idea. The way Spurs are playing right now and with the fixtures that we have coming up, it's difficult, particularly with Liverpool in game week 22. So from a defensive point of view, I absolutely think they are. The midfield is more difficult to kind of know what's going to happen at Spurs. I think with Harry Kane injured, likely going to mean that we see Son playing up top with the likes of Dele. Probably Eriksen, but let's see, because it is January, the transfer window is open, we know that he wants to leave, so that could potentially happen. Now without him, then who's going to play? Lamela we saw come back from injury in game week 21. We've also got Lo Celso who could play in those positions, so let's see how he uses those players. But at the moment it's really difficult to kind of pick out a Spurs player and say that's the one. I think for me, probably, I own Dele Alli. I'm going to hold Dele for the next couple. I think it's hard to kind of say that they're completely gone as FPL assets, because not a couple of weeks back we were talking about how do we double and treble up on Spurs. So I'm not necessarily going to go all out there and say that we're dead yet. I think in previous seasons, if you look back at Spurs without Harry Kane, actually those players that have come and kind of stepped up, and Spurs as a whole have played in some ways better and accumulated more points without him in the team. So just because Kane is now injured doesn't necessarily mean that our other Spurs assets are no longer assets. The extra cut replay against Middlesbrough next week does kind of throw a spanner in the works, because you would assume that Mourinho is going to put out another full strength team. He's made it very clear that the cup run is really important to him, and having seen the full strength side he put out against Middlesbrough in the first, or the original match between the two sides, we would expect him to follow up again with that next week. So that makes it difficult, because then we've got some 3 very close fixtures in which you would expect the first team to be playing. They already look tired, and they already looked a bit short of ideas. So as FPL assets, I think patience is going to wear thin very quickly with Spurs assets. Keep an eye on their value, keep an eye on price rises and price falls, because there's a lot of people that will be moving their Spurs assets on to enable them to get on. Maybe Felipe Anderson, who we've just been talking about, or more likely probably one of the Liverpool midfielders. So if you own the likes of Lucas Moura, Son, Dele, and there's no improvement from Spurs over the next couple of weeks, prior to that double game week in 24, I can see a lot of transfers out for them in favour of the likes of owning the other one of Salah or Mane, depending upon who you own at the moment, or one of the other Liverpool assets. Okay then, so fourth question that we had, best goalkeeper for now until the second wildcard. So this one's kind of varying depending upon when you think you might play your second wildcard. So if you think that the second wildcard you're going to use relatively soon, say before or up to game week 26-ish, then there's 2 kind of standout keepers for me that we should be looking at. Both of them, strangely, teams with new managers. So Foster at Watford and Pickford at Everton. Now, the short-term fixtures for those 2 clubs up until game week 26 look good. They look like there should be some clean sheets in there for both of those keepers. We've seen over the course of the season so far that Foster's bonus points are ridiculous in terms of his status amongst the goalkeepers. So they both should get good attacking returns. They've both got new manager bounce about the team, so they look better as a whole. The defences in front of them are playing better. Watford are starting to have some of their players beginning to come back. The likes of Janmaat should be back for 22, maybe 23, but certainly soon. So that will improve the defences of Watford. And we've seen at Everton, the likes of Holgate and Digne starting to play a bit more kind of as we would expect Everton to under Ancelotti since he arrived. So if you're looking to play your wildcard sort of prior to or up to game week 26, one of those 2 maybe might be nice options. Or of course there's Fabianski and Alisson with the double, but you know, it depends on how you want to go about bringing in your assets for those 2 double game week clubs. If you want to hold your wildcard for a little bit longer, so if you're looking say up to game week 29, just slightly beyond that even maybe, so you're looking at thinking about when the next set of doubles or the blank game weeks might come about, and starting to kind of plan for those. And if we run the Fantasy Football Scout fixture ticker through from game week 22 up to game week 29, we see the top sitting pretty as they are in the league. Alisson at Liverpool. Now, his fixtures are the nicest over that run that we've got coming up. There's a couple of things that I would kind of question about owning him though. One is that he is obviously expensive. So he's going to cost you that little bit more money than the likes of, you know, Foster and Pickford, who I was talking about before. But also he takes up a valuable Liverpool spot. Now, if your strategy going into game week 24's double is to own 2 Liverpool defenders, then potentially you might look at having Alisson, because the fixtures are nice. The clean sheet potentially, as we've seen over the last 5 weeks, is there. We should see some kind of longevity from owning him. My worry is with using a spot on Alisson is that means you don't use a second defender spot on either Trent or Robertson, you know, because ideally I think you'd have those 2. So for me, Alisson's there with the best fixtures, but there's a big caveat as to how you're going to use your Liverpool 3 spots in your side, because most people will have 3 Liverpool going into that double, and obviously lack of attacking returns from Alisson would make me want to give it that spot to an extra defender rather than the goalkeeper. So following on from Alisson then in the ticker between 22 and 29 are Ryan at Brighton and then Henderson at Sheffield United. Both of these I think are excellent picks. Sheffield United are very good defensively, and even when they do lose their clean sheet, Henderson picks up save points a lot. So if you're looking for a decent option with decent fixtures who picks up save points, then Henderson for me looks a great bet. Brighton are a little bit hit and miss at the moment, but again, Ryan does have a tendency to pick up save points and bonus points. So between the two of them, they look like nice options. Now, what I particularly like about these two moving forward is the rotation between the two of them. Obviously, the fixtures are nice, and if you're thinking about maybe having your bench boost chip in action at some point between your wild card or before your wild card or around your wild card, then these two as rotating cheap keepers could be really nice options. So short term, if you're keeping your wild card only for the next sort of 3 weeks or so, then maybe look at Foster and Pickford. If you're looking to hold your wild card for a little bit longer, then the likes of Ryan and Henderson could be really good options. All right then, final question that you guys asked. Other less popular Liverpool options for the double? I'm definitely the wrong half of the FPL family to answer this one. So,
hello!
have this one. Okay, Lee. So
slide in like this.
Slide in. This one's the best option for talking about the Liverpool options for the double game week. Now, we're talking about the least or less popular options. So the players, so no Manes and Salahs and all of that kind of stuff. They're kind of the givens.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for another way into Liverpool for game week 24, the likes of, and the people that they asked about in the question, Gomez, Firmino, Alisson, who I've kind of a bit spoken about during the goalkeepers, but you can give your view on him.
Okay.
And Minamino, your new
Minamino.
guy. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So go on, thoughts on those guys. So maybe let's start with the defence. Alisson, Gomez, either of them you think is a viable option?
Well, the first thing I have to say on this is that it's Liverpool, and I actually don't think you should cut corners. And I know that's not the point of the question, but the point I want to make is it's the Liverpool double game week. If you absolutely have to, then save some money by going with the guys that we're going to talk about. But if you can afford it, Salah, Mane and Trent are the three to have, no question. If you want to use a triple captainship, I don't think that's a bad option either. So that's the first thing to say. However, if those are difficult to get to and you are saving a few pounds here and there, Alisson, yeah, sure, if you want. But listen, it's a double game week. You want to maximise as many points as you can. And I actually think, there could be a couple of clean sheets there. But going away to Wolves and away to West Ham, I think away to Wolves is tricky. Liverpool can concede there. Despite the fact at time of recording we've got 5 clean sheets back to back. So the clean sheets are coming, as we've been saying all season. We've been saying the clean sheets are coming, and they just never have. But all of a sudden they are here now, which is good. So if you want Alisson, sure, I guess he could get you 6 points against West Ham. He'd get you a couple of points probably against Wolves, and you'll get 8 points. Could Fabianski also get that in a double game week? Well, yeah, for a lot cheaper. So Alisson, fine if you want to, but not for me. Joe Gomez, yeah, sure, a similar sort of scenario really, because of that back four, Joe Gomez, and by the way, I think Lovren and Matip are not too far from coming back. So is Joe Gomez a nice option now? Well, yes. And has he cemented that position in the side? Yes. But the other two guys are quite close to coming back. So by the time we roll out for game week 24, he might not even play. It could be that Klopp decides he wants to put Matip straight back in there. So watch out for that. Keep your eyes on that. Joe Gomez obviously carries a lot less threat, both for assists and goals, than Trent and Robbo, and probably less goal threat than Van Dijk as well. So yeah, sure, if you want to cut some corners again, then go for Joe Gomez. But he's going to probably save you $1 million or so, but you're going to lose that upside in a Liverpool double game week of no assists and no goals, probably, from Gomez. Elsewhere, who was else on your list?
Minamino and Firmino.
So, of the two, I think it's far too early for Minamino, is the first thing to say. He had a decent run out in the FA Cup and he put in a good shift.
6.5?
Yeah, it feels like for an attack-minded Liverpool midfielder, that doesn't sound like a bad price. But the reason he's priced at 6.5 is because you just don't know if he's going to get that slot in the first team. And it's going to take something pretty monumental to displace that front three. Now, there's a chance that he plays slightly behind in the furthest forward of the midfield three, sure. But I think there's competition for that place as well with Keita, who's currently injured, and Oxlade-Chamberlain and others. And even Henderson obviously can play there once Fabinho comes back, and I think Fabinho's pretty close to coming back. I think he's bought Minamino as someone that can play in that Firmino role. There's no doubt that last game, game week 21, Firmino was the poorest of that front three, and that's because he looked knackered, frankly. He looked absolutely knackered. So I think he's brought Minamino in with a view to being a very versatile and good squad player. Okay. So don't fancy him for the double game week, given that there are 6 whole days between the 2 games in Liverpool's double game week. So it's not like we're playing 2 or 3 days apart here. There is a period of time where they can rest and recuperate. So Minamino, not for me. Firmino is the really interesting one. That's the really interesting one, because I said at the top of this piece, well, if you want to go for Salah and Mane, then great, but that is probably going to require some surgery, right? And in my own team, I have Salah right now. I am running scared of Mane in that double game week. I really, really want to have Mane. And if I was to tell you right now who I'd put my triple captainship on, it would be Mane if I had him. Ooh. If I do have him for 24, I will captain him, triple captain him for 24, if I have him.
Oh, wow.
But, of course, as you rightly say, that requires quite a lot of team surgery and moving around budgets and stuff, right? So, Firmino is the other nice option there. Now, we say on our live streams, and we've said on Fantasy Football Scout videos before, Firmino's goals this season tend to be coming away from home. I can't remember how many he's got away from home, but it's significantly more than he's got at home. So he tends to be far better in terms of FPL points away from home. Now, in double game week 24, both Liverpool's fixtures are away from home. Yeah. They're teams that he can get at in terms of Wolves and West Ham, no doubt about it. We've seen how West Ham have been a little bit more defensively solid under Moyes, and we expect them to be more defensively solid, although they've only really played Bournemouth so far, and Bournemouth weren't particularly good, were they? No. So yeah, I guess if you don't want to completely mess up the structure of your team, which I don't.
Because he's only 9.3, and if you've got a Kane-related problem, then Firmino is a nice, easy way into triple Liverpool.
And there's a lot of people falling out of love a little bit with Rashford recently as well. Now, I am absolutely not selling Rashford ahead of Norwich at home for the upcoming game week 22. But after that, the fixtures start to get a little bit more tricky. So if you want to do a straight swap, you don't want to do that surgery that I was talking about before, Rashford to Firmino, nice differential, by the way, Firmino. Still under 10% owned in team selected buys. So everyone's rushing to Mane and Salah. If you want to go different, maybe have a look at Firmino. But if every time Mane gets that ball, if he's not in your team, it's going to be a hard watch those 2 games, especially with half the community triple captaining him. So my advice, don't cut corners. But out of everyone we've discussed, if you go in to save a bit of money somewhere, have a look at Firmino.
Okay. Okay, guys, that is it from me and Lee this week. I'll be back next week for a normal Sam Says, looking at all things game week 22, thinking about the scout notes. Leave us a like before you go, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Thanks, guys.